once they've identified this person or group, and then they just begin that cycle of hatred, right? And that gets passed down through modeling for our kids. It gets passed down, in media. It gets passed down culturally, especially when large groups of people feel that sense of hate. And when that hate metastasizes in government and in industry and things like that, we see it reflected. Baldwin talks about this a lot. He says, I don't know that the credit unions hate me, but I know they don't give me a loan, right? He's got a whole list of ways that hatred is maybe indirectly, that's a little more nuanced, impacting him and people that look like him, right? Yeah. It's not always as direct as it was in the beginning of the film, where they're integrating with other, where they're desegregating the schools, right? Where people are directly saying why directing the hate directly towards somebody. Sometimes it's a little more, a little more nuanced than that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's so easy to create the culture, us versus them. So it's like finding someone or a group of people to demonize, to blame our problems on other people, which keeps people separated. It causes the division and causes the hatred. So it feels like it's, intentionally created.
I feel like people just do that almost instinctually in all parts of their lives. So of course, for something as big as that, like, they would do it. It's, I feel like most people end up don't wanting to think that something that went wrong could possibly be their fault, and so it's so easy to lean into all of that,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just like when I'm talking to my kids about they've done something wrong and they don't want to be accountable for it.
Yeah.
It's like, we need to be accountable for ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same. Yeah. It's the same argument with so many people who, to put a lens on something else, like people who grow up without a mom, or people that grow up without a dad, or with a dad who's awful, or with a mom who's awful, and then they become adults and they've been kind of going through a lot of vicious cycles in their own life that, they directly impart to the fact that, oh, my mother was awful to me, or my dad was awful to me. But at some point as an adult, you have to say, okay, this stuff happened to me in my life and it's awful, but I need to take responsibility for the things that take responsibility for my life,
Absolutely. And just taking ownership for things.
Yeah.
And what really struck me about this is the account, like when poor Sydney, when James Baldwin's talking about the Sidney Poitier jumping on the train, right?
Yeah.
And so he says he jumps off so that white people know that black people don't hate them.
Yeah.
Right. That's like, oh my God, it's like
mind-blowing.
Right?
It's mind-blowing. And it's interesting, Henry. My son Jeremiah watched it with his father, and I asked him, I was like, what stuck out in this documentary to you? And that was the exact scene. And I think that Black people sometimes feel like they have to show, that we are good people and we care and we are humane and we are there for other people. And it's like, what are we sacrificing? Everything. And if the thing was reversed, would that white man have jumped off for that Black man? I don't think so. And would it have been expected for him to? Like, does he have to prove anything to us? No, it's just a given. So yeah, I thought that was like one of like a real symbolic moment in that movie.
Yeah, you're right. And it's like, what is the expectation? That's a really great point, right? Not whether the white guy would have jumped off, but it was the expectation that Poitier does.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Okay, Henry.
Yeah, that's great. John, we thought we would direct this very appropriate question towards the comic book guy.
Oh yeah, totally.
we thought it was a good one considering your your affinities. So what is a hero? That's the first part. And the follow-up is, who are your heroes?
Oh, well, in my opinion, a hero is somebody that even when things are difficult, they still kind of dig deep and do the things that they know are right, even if it's something that isn't necessarily comfortable for them or isn't necessarily easy for them to do at a particular moment. Um, I mean, to put it in comic book terms,
Absolutely.
my favorite superhero growing up was always Spider-Man. And it was because he was a kid that I could see myself in there. And as a black kid, I always loved it because he had a full face mask, so I could pretend that I was Spider-Man.
Yeah, absolutely.
And but inherently, the thing about Spider-Man that was always consistent was the fact that even after he had a huge fight with like a supervillain or something about something, um, there would a lot of times be these moments where like the world is like falling apart around him. The supervillain has been beaten and is laying there, and he saved everybody and he could just get out of there. But the last thing he does is he picks that other person up, that person that he was just fighting with, and drags them out of there and tries to impart to them like, hey, like it's his job to make sure that everybody is safe, and he doesn't compromise on that ever. And he doesn't hate anybody. He may hate what people are doing or hate certain acts or whatever, but his first and foremost job in his mind as a hero is to make sure everybody's safe. And
Yeah.
I always love that about him. And he always does it, even at times when it's most difficult, when he's got homework to do, or he's got to get home and make sure Aunt May's okay, or just
Like so
whatever.
many responsibilities.
Yeah.
And John, I think it's important. Like you hit on so many things that are so important. I think that we need to touch on, if you will. So the fact of media representation for Black men and African Americans. So the only way you can envision yourself being this superhero was because he was masked. So what does that say about media representation in America for African Americans?
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable? Can I ask you that?
No, completely. I mean, I forgot who I was talking to the other day, but somebody asked me, we were having a meeting the other day, and somebody said, when was the first time you realized you were Black? And I vividly remember that, because in terms of media, I was on the playground and I was playing with my friends, and when we were kids, there was a TV show called The A-Team starring Mr. T. Awesome. And we would play The A-Team a lot. And one day we went out to recess, and I wanted to be Hannibal, the leader of the A-Team, who was like an older white-haired white man. And everybody was like, no, you can't be Hannibal. And I was like, why not? And it was because I was Black. I had to be BA. And that was like the first
Yes, it's a
first
smack
time.
in the face. And do you know what's really sad? It's like I still see it today and this generation that we have today, when a lot of the representation, a lot of the media, a lot of the Disney is white based, and what white people feel is beautiful. So like I see situations where my youngest daughter, when she wants to be a certain princess, well, you can't be that. And then there's an underrepresentation of African American and an underrepresentation of African American beauty. So it's like then you have this internal hatred, and it brings me back to the film where the girl was trying to deny her own mother just so that she could fit in. And that's powerful. That's really
that
sad.
movie, like when you see that, and it's just like when she says that to her mom, you're just like, oh, like right in the heart. Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, compared to when we were kids, in terms of film and television, things are getting better. But there's still a very long way to go.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do. I completely agree.
Yeah.
John, did you have anything to ask?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No problem.
So I wanted to ask you, what is your definition of the American dream?
Okay, I think that's a great question. So for me, the American dream is, so first I would start with myself because I want to provide for my family. I want to make sure that I put my children in the best school district so that they could become successful. I want to make sure that they're fully nourished and they have everything that they could possibly need to be successful in their education process.
Absolutely.
All right. So, and the foundation is, putting them in a good school district. And without that, it's like really hard. How can they be successful in college if they don't have those foundational blocks already built within them? So I want to be able to let my son, who is now 13 and almost my height, I want to feel comfortable with him walking through the village. I want to feel comfortable if his head gets cold, that he can wear a hoodie without him being prejudged, without the fear of any retaliation because of any negative connotations, because the media depicts on African-American people. I want him to get the best education he could ever possibly get and to get into a great school and to be able to provide for his family. I want to pass on generational wealth to my family, to his. And that is my American dream. Henry, would you agree with that American dream? Are there any things that are different or the same?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think for our own children, it's definitely that's exactly what I would want to see for my own kids. Sadly, though, I think that American dream is a little easier for my kids to attain than for the children of people, like children of color, right? There's going to be roadblocks thrown up left and right. I don't have to have a conversation with my son about wearing a hoodie and how he might be portrayed, and he doesn't have to live with that in the back of his mind every time he leaves the house and it's cold out. And I wish we could say like we're beyond that as a country, but we're not. I mean, it's been proven time and time again. A kid with a toy gun, I mean, being shot in the streets, people going into other people's, police going to other people's houses, and it's a little.
When they turn 16, the conversations that Tashena and I have to have with our sons when we're teaching them to drive.
Yeah, the conversations we're probably already having.
Yeah.
We're probably already having, because I'm already having it with my son.
Yeah.
Jeremiah, what would you do if this happens? I don't know, Mom, I'll walk away. Oh God, Jeremiah, don't walk away. I don't even know what to tell you, but I can tell you, just come home alive. Come home. And it's heartbreaking. And a lot of people, because they don't experience what we're dealing with, it's hard to relate. But this is a reality in America. And I feel like in order for a meaningful change to happen, it's going to have to happen with all of us. Like, it's not my burden alone. It's not your burden alone, John, to carry this. I feel like it has to be.
What you just said brings up a really good point too, about how you don't know what to say to him, because in the end, if somebody wants to do something because of however they feel about how he looks or how you look or how I look, it almost doesn't even matter what we do in that situation to try and diffuse it, because there's no formula to it.
No, there's
So,
no right answer. And
yeah,
you know, what we do is we raise our children to the best of our ability.
yeah,
And I know your son and my son, they're good friends.
yeah,
And you know, and we raise them well and then we send them out. And then it's, you know, I just pray that people will love him the way I love him. Like,
yeah,
this is a good boy. Treat him like he's an amazing person, because that is exactly what he is. So it's
Right.
like, I just, you know, hope and wish that people will bestow the same love on him that I have.
yeah, exactly.
And it goes back for me to that, you know, Baldwin was talking about like the hero in media and the hero in society is always this, you know, John Wayne version. And he says, and John, I think it's so great that you brought up when you first felt that being Black, because Baldwin talks about, you know, he thought he was the hero in the story, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden he realized the society is telling him he's the villain,
Yeah.
right? And when you've got people that are programmed culturally to believe that, like, it's not surprising that a child of color is then villainized and made this, like, they're older than the people think they're older than they are, and they're projected like this false sense of, you know, early masculinity, and so they're more dangerous, and they become a super predator, and like,
Super predator.
it all
Yeah.
fits together, right? It all
Absolutely.
fits together.
Which is
Yeah.
why you can get a 9-year-old girl being, you know, handcuffed and forced into a police car and maced, and yet you can have a, you know, 19 or 20-year-old college student who does awful things to like a sorority girl, and when he goes to court they say, oh, don't ruin his life, you know, don't say anything, don't do this. He's still got so much, you know, so much potential.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like such great conversation. And while we continue to unpack this conversation, I want people that are watching to feel free to join in the chat, and we will take your questions and we will answer them. So feel free to ask any questions to any of our panels, and we'll discuss what's being said.
Tashena, this is Elizabeth. I figure it was easier for me to just vocalize the question rather than type it. Hi there. So we had a question come in from a 5th grader, and that person asks, I'm wondering why we don't learn about James Baldwin in school.
So let's see. I'm going to take the first part of the conversation, and then Henry, you're a 7th grade social studies teacher, so then you can have at it. I feel like American history, I feel like it's, you know, interpreted in a way that is not, like, it appeals to the winner, right? So the winner writes history. So I don't feel like it's a direct representation of what they want us to learn. They don't want people to know the true history of American history, because American history is not all beautiful. And I think that that's a great question that you asked. And I think that it's important, you know, in this generation for us to start including people like James Baldwin, like people like Malcolm X, but not just, you know, Malcolm X, like the horrible terrorist, but like, let's actually talk about what he was about and what he stood for. So like, speaking on true history, like even talking about, there's like so much history that has been interrupted and that has been changed. And I feel like it's time to like put history and true perspective and actually, you know, tell the truth about what really happened in American history. Christopher Columbus, we're still celebrating him. So it's like, what are we really doing? Because it's glorifying what? It's not the truth. So I think it's time to like really start putting the truth in perspective. John, did you want to add?
I think the educational system here has, almost like what you said, they only want to kind of show what they can paint as even a little bit rosy, and they dash in just the right amount of I guess, struggle and plight and things like that, but they don't get too deep into it, because essentially, to make this country what it was not a pretty process, and it was not a process that included being kind or humane to a lot of people. Like, it's, the thing is, when you have a utopia or something, like in Camelot, like they didn't talk about you know, any of the blood that was, you know, kind of sown in order to build that castle and that round table. All they want to talk about is, look how wonderful everything is now. And
whose backs and whose blood was
yeah.
shed. Henry, did you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's important too to consider the, you know, the way the curriculum is written. A lot of the inclusion, at least in my curriculum, of people of color is the oppression that people of color have undertaken, and not so much the exceptional people and individuals that have contributed things other than their blood, sweat, and tears. Right?
And not many modern modern historical figures. There's so much in like the textbooks throughout all the grades where they talk about, like, George Washington Carver. They'll talk about you know, they'll talk about anything before the Industrial Revolution, and then kind of once you get into the 20th century, they don't want too much that has to do with anything that's not
Comfortable.
directly, it's not directly related to plight.
Right. And it's got to be Martin Luther King Jr.
Yep.
And Rosa Parks.
Yep.
And not and I, you know, I talked
to all.
John, right. I talked to you, John and Tashena, like, when I was brought up, Malcolm X, man, he was the bad guy. He was a really bad guy.
He was. Melina just said that we should celebrate Native Americans instead of Christopher Columbus.
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you for adding that.
Yeah.
And then I just want to also add Martha Honey. She says, I think that a large part of what Baldwin is saying is that the main problem is that whites are largely ignorant, willfully ignorant of our history and of realities under which Blacks have lived and are living, and that we can only change systematically and individually if we really examine and come to understand what racism has done. So perhaps willful ignorance by whites rather than in overt hatred. So yeah, I appreciate your comment.
The nuance of racism and how it's been systematic. Yeah.
I think actually a nuance of racism also, because personally I think racism is it's essentially like, it's one thing that we've been led to believe is, you know, there's racism towards Black people, there's racism towards Asian people, there's racism towards, you know, immigrants, there's racism towards, you know, this person, this group, LGBTQs. And the thing is, it's all the same package.
Yeah.
And part of the trick is making sure all of these groups think that they're getting a different flavor of it, whereas everybody,
or one is a little bit higher than the other.
Yeah.
So we can treat someone else a little bit worse.
Yeah.
Just to keep ourselves up.
To keep ourselves up and to keep us all separated and from realizing we're all being marginalized.
Absolutely.
For the benefit of whatever this systemic, you know, machine is.
Yeah. All right. So we'll take another question, Elizabeth.
Okay. So here's a question for Tashena and or Jean. What is one thing that you wish white people knew about being Black in America?
Well, that is, and who asked that question, Elizabeth?
I'm not totally sure. I got it in my text.
It's okay. I think it's a great question, but I just wanted to give respect to the person that asked that question. John, did you want to unpack that first, or I can?
Well, I'll let you go. I'll let you start, and maybe I'll add to it, because I think that is a very large bag of a question.
Yeah. Okay, so Elizabeth, so the question is, what is the one thing that you want white people to know about being Black in America? I just want to make sure I got that right.
Yes, that was the question, and to clarify, it was a private question. So I don't know who it came from.
I just want people to know that I am a person. I am a person. My child is a child. I love my child like your mother would love you as a child. And I just want, white people to know that we want to be treated equally. I just want to walk into the grocery store and feel comfortable. I want to go for a run and, get the friendly wave, not the peace sign. I don't know what that is. I go for runs. I don't really know what that is, but okay. I don't want to be a political, figure in certain moments. I just want to live the American dream. I just want to be. I don't want to be interrupted by anyone, but my son getting the best education or my child getting the best education. I want him to be the best he can without any interruptions. Like, life is hard and we deal with a lot of racism on a daily basis, to be honest, but it's like, I just, want to live happy and raise happy children and get the best education for my children so that they could be the most successful that they can be. What do you say, John?
I guess what I would say is I definitely agree with all of that. And yeah, like a big component of this is Black people in America, like, me personally, we just want to live our lives is all it comes down to. And we don't want to take anything away from anybody else's life. We literally just want to live our own lives, without having to worry about somebody feeling that our life is somehow negatively impacting their lives, because that's not what we're doing. And yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to, is like, I just wish everybody would realize that all of us, all of our lives affect each other. Like,
absolutely,
we all literally need each other, because if we keep going down the path that we're going, then eventually the human race is just going to crumble into something, and something else is just going to come and replace us,
we're all in this together. Like, we have to like get rid of the mentality of us versus them, or the separation. Like, we are one race. We are the human race. Let's treat each other with respect, love, and dignity, humanity, so that we can continue.
I'd also like people to know that Black Lives Matter is not a terrorist group.
No, it does not.
It is a
not mean that
it's a statement.
Hate the police. No, it does not mean any of that.
It's a statement that has an implied "to," as in TOO at the end of it. Like, what the statement is saying is Black Lives Matter too. LGBTQ lives matter too. It's a
I think people oftentimes feel like, oh, if you say Black Lives Matter, then that means you hate the police, and
or you hate white people, or
that is the complete opposite. Like, yes, I love the police and I love Black lives, and I feel like the reason why we're saying this is because too oftentimes we're seeing Black men, our children's age, dying at the hands of an unjust system. All right, so we're going to move forward to the next question.
Okay, ready to go here. This questioner says, I'm interested in the concept of moral monstrosity that Baldwin mentions in the film. Considering the American experiment was founded with the down payment of slavery in the systematic killing of Native peoples, is the American experiment redeemable? I think that would be for anybody on the panel who wants to answer that.
Wow.
Henry, your mind looks blown. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's an incredible
That is a
way
great
to
question.
frame things. I mean, my instinct says like, yeah, if we don't think we're redeemable as a nation, then we're in a lot of trouble. I think that when Baldwin's talking about like how he says something like, and I have it written down, but I think I got it. He says something to the effect of, you know, I have the advantage in this because you're not seeing me, like I'm seeing who you are. I see who you are, but you've dehumanized me so much
that you can't even see me.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that we need to, like, in order to move forward, I mean, the simplest answer to that in my mind is like, we just need to confront it all and just be real with it and be real with the legacy that has happened. It's not, you know, John and Tashena, you've said it so many times. It's not perfect. It was ugly. It's still ugly.
And it's messy.
But it's like, that's what it is. Like, being American isn't standing up for the flag every time and professing how great you know, what American exceptionalism is. It's reflecting on who we are as a nation and doing better.
Yeah.
I think even aside from just like shining light just on America, I think for anybody or anything to be redeemable, after you've made mistakes, however bloody or small they might be, the first step is to say, we made these mistakes, and to
absolutely recognize,
to own up to it, to lean into it, and to try to figure out, now that I realize that it's AA meetings. First step, admit I am an alcoholic. First step, admit we built the country on other people's bodies. And then what do you do to kind of move past that?
What do you do with that?
Yeah, instead of doubling down and just kind of
blaming those people.
Yeah, exactly. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps when we have taken everything from you, everything you tried to build, no reparations for the work that you've done to build America, and now fix yourself. What's wrong with you? And I think that's an unrealistic expectation.
It's the false narrative of the American dream, right? That's possible for every single person.
Yeah.
Like that's just.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go on to the next question.
Next question. And this questioner is struck by the duality that James Baldwin describes, that individual white people may not hate him, and in fact he's close to, you know, individual white people himself, but that it doesn't matter. That's not how white people need to acknowledge their responsibility for racism. And just wondering how the panel reacts to that. Like it's not enough to, you know, not actively hate.
Oh, I got you.
Right.
It's not enough to just say, I would never, you know,
right.
I would never do such a thing, but there needs to be active, progressive work on your part if you do want to affect some change, which in my opinion involves like when you're, you know, in a restaurant or somewhere with a group of people and it turns out there's no people of color around at all, and somebody in the group that you're with says something that you're like, oof, that is really offensive, or that is really racist, or something like that, instead of just kind of being quiet and, you know, kind of accepting it. Being the person that's like, hey, that's actually not cool.
That's not okay. And it's not okay, not because there's a black or there's not a black person here, but it's just not okay because it's not okay. So just setting certain standards of what is acceptable and what is not.
So actively, as opposed to just internalizing that piece, actively going out and acting on that, not patronizing a business that is not welcoming to people of color, or where people of color may not be comfortable going.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Right.
this. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
Tashena.
go ahead, Elizabeth. I was going to bring it back to you.
Okay. This is somewhat related, but how do you think parents can raise children who are more empathetic?
I would love to take this one.
Yeah,
And
please.
then you guys, I want you to join in. But I think like a big part, how about we diversify the libraries? Like just even in your own home, like just start incorporating other things that don't look like them, other cultures, other experiences, like bring that on in so that you can begin the conversation. Because I wonder what children think sometimes. Do Black people just come from nowhere and then they appear? Like bring them on in, like here we are. And I feel like representation is so important. And that's why I make sure that my daughter's, her bookshelf and my son's bookshelf, they have characters that represent them, and not just, the basketball player, the football player, or the child without a father. John, you're a great father. Jeremiah has a great father. Like all of these like negative representations that are like stuck in Americans' brains because of the media. Like, let's undo some of that. Let's unpack some of that. So I think a good part is just showing some diversity. Like when I let my daughter watch Netflix, and not very often, like there's not many people that look like her. There's not many mothers in the movies that she watches that looks like me. So it's like hard for me to like let her, go blindly into this world without any direct representation of her and her family. So I think it's time for us to start to be aware of what we're feeding our children, because they are being fed through their brain about, what it's supposed to look like or what's supposed to happen. So like just making deliberate and intentional things, like feeding their brains with stuff that doesn't just look like what they're accustomed to.
I mean, I do that.
That's one start.
Weekly, there are kids and adults who are constantly asking for like, oh, I want a really cool comic book to read. And at those times, I try to take the opportunity to be like, oh, you should read this awesome story. Like, what kind of story do you want? Just a story about life? Read this awesome book about like, this Black woman who, is, she's a superhero.
And make it part of the norm, right?
Yeah. Or read this awesome book right here. This is about a man who, a man who is married to this other man who's like an awesome superhero, or like, it's like just normalizing everything, because there is no other. Like, I think that's what it comes down. What you're saying is like, stop making everything other, and just like,
don't wait until Black History Month to celebrate Black history, because Black history is American history.
Yeah.
We don't have to wait for February, the shortest month of the year, to cram everything in and
shortest, coldest month of the year.
The coldest. I mean, I don't mind because I enjoy winter sports, but let's celebrate it like it's just part of the curriculum. Let's not wait until February to celebrate what African Americans have contributed and have built in America.
Absolutely.
Henry,
what you're saying, what I'm hearing from you, I can kind of personify in my own experiences, right? My daughter, I had no idea how much work, for example, her hair would be to learn how to do her hair properly. It has been an eye-opening experience for
Henry,
me.
call me, I'll help you.
and my wife and I both, like, it's something we're struggling with, right? I had no idea that was the experience of Black women's hair, and like, we need to understand those experiences, validate them, and make it like exactly like both of you said. It's okay. Like, it's not
it's okay.
It's great.
And do you know what? It's so funny. I was just doing a friend's hair, and she like kind of mentioned like, oh, it might be easier if it was more European hair. No, I love our hair. I love Black hair. And, unfortunately, it's not, properly represented on media as it being something of beauty. But there are so many different things. It is such a fun texture. There's so much history and love and hair. And I love it. I already told John, I'm like, oh, let your son come over one more time.
Yeah.
John, we'll send both our kids over.
Bring them over. I'll be Auntie Tashena for sure.
One of the most fun things that I saw last year in terms of like Black hair in media was when the new Star Trek show stars Michael Burnham is like the hero, and she's this awesome Black woman. And when she came back this season, she had like braids. And it was like, I was like, oh my God, like you don't see that in like mainstream.
A lot of times you'll see like Black women with not Black women hair.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But for her to come back in braids, and then you look at the Black Panther and they had short hair and afros and braids, like a true representation of Black hair. I love it. I think it's
it was awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And so we just had a 5-minute conversation on one piece of your experience, right? And so we need to normalize all of your experiences.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. All right, we'll take one more question.
Yeah, I was going to say we're a few minutes over here, but maybe if there's time for one more question. I'd also mention to people too, in the chat, Andrea has shared a lot of really useful links to good websites, good resources. So I just point people's attention toward that. So final question. What does racism look like here in Northern Dutchess? And the person is, referring to things that we may not see if our eyes are not really actively looking for it. That could be for anybody on the panel.
I think this is a great question. What does it look like? All right, so racism is racism, right? And so it's all racism. So I think, I went to school in the South and it was just very clear. It was very divided. Like the racists hung their flags and they made it very clear. So maybe it's more of an undertone in the Northeast, but it's still like very obvious to like a Black person. So to me, like, and here's a shocker, racism, or here's a shocker, my fellow white people. But when I go into a store and people tell me, oh, I think I just saw your sister. I saw someone that looks just like you. I don't think you did. And so I think that could be a little bit of racism. And I don't think that it's like coming from a hateful place, but I think it's coming from an ignorant place that needs to be checked and needs to be identified. So when I asked my husband, and my husband is white, do you get the peace sign a lot when you go jogging? No, never. And then I asked my Black son, Jeremiah, do you get the peace sign a lot when you're out all the time? They do all kinds of things. So I'm like, oh, that might be a little racist. I think that you're trying to be friendly, but something, I don't know. So I think that it does manifest itself in different ways. And I think that the only thing is, I don't think that people are trying to be intentionally racist, but I do think that there needs to be a little bit more thought of, how to interact with people of color possibly. But if you just treat us like we're just people, then you won't even have to overthink it. And
just don't say things that are racist, and then just talk to us like you talk to everybody else.
Yeah. Don't say, oh, I think I just saw your sister, or there's too many people on that are here with us today, like good friends of mine. Like we met because everyone thought I was dumb and they were me. And we look nothing alike, I promise you. They're beautiful, but we don't, we don't look anything alike. So just
when I opened my store in Rhinebeck, I cannot count how many times people would come in and they would be shopping or whatever and doing like small talk and chit chat. And then eventually at some point I would get well, can you get me in touch with the owner? And then I would say, this is my shop, I own this shop. And they'd be like, oh. And then I would see a myriad of expressions happening on their face within like a few seconds, and then they would end up leaving without even telling me what it was they wanted to talk to the owner about.
Yeah,
And
feels like racism a little bit, huh?
a little bit. Yeah. So
what about you, Henry?
There's a lot, but yeah.
I mean, as I'm sitting here listening to you talk, I think that some people may need to understand and hear why it's acceptable for somebody maybe to say to me, you look like somebody else, but it's a different experience for a person of color, right?
When there's not so many of us here.
Yeah.
Right.
So
and so, you know, our experiences are different. And so we're those kinds of questions were like, back to there, let me touch your hair. Those questions are coming from a different place than they would be coming to me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, clearly John and I, maybe nobody be
no,
asking.
here, I can't help you guys out, no matter how hard I try. There's no.
But
then there's
I think. Go ahead, John.
There's also like subtle bits where it's like because of the fact that racism is like so big and complicated and just with so many intricacies, then there's things where like sometimes you're having a perfectly pleasant conversation and like I'll be talking to some guy and then out of nowhere he'll be like, yeah, totally, bro, which for the most part is a very innocuous kind of term of endearment between guys now. Like guys of every, you know, age and color and everything. But for me, when I hear somebody say that to me, I'm saying, like, in my head, I'm like, is this person saying this because they always say this to anybody? Or
I know, that's how I feel about the peace sign.
To me because I'm black. Because
like, is the peace sign because they want peace, or is it because I'm black and they think that black people give each other the peace sign? Yeah, I've never given you the peace sign, John.
Thank you.
And that's the crux of it, because if somebody gave me the peace sign or said bro to me, I wouldn't think twice about it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's such an important.
But I'm also interested in like, how often does that happen to you? Do you get the peace sign every time you go out? Do you get bro every time?
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more messy.
Yeah.
All right. So, wow, what powerful, meaningful conversation that we have unpacked tonight. And I want to thank everyone for being a part of this, for joining us. And I think something that's really interesting that James Baldwin says is not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So let's deal with this head on, and we're in this together. And in order to have meaningful change, we're going to have to really, work together. So I just want to give a special I had these conversations, and they're not always easy. They're difficult conversations. They could be a little bit messy, a little bit complicated, but it's so worth having. And I appreciate everyone that, took part of this today. And I want to give a special thanks to Jenny, people behind the scenes, Jenny, Bob, Elizabeth, for your questions. Elizabeth's voice was behind the scenes, and I love it. Andrea, and I want to thank you so much for John and for Henry for joining us tonight. And I feel like it was just an amazing experience and something that Rhinebeck is not used to, but maybe it's time for us to start getting used to something a little bit different. So I really want to thank everyone for being a part of this.
Yeah, thanks for letting me be a part of this.
Thanks, Tashena. Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone have a great evening. And for more information about CultureConnect, the website is in the chat. Find out how you can get involved, how you can be a part of the conversation, and how you can be a part of the change. Good night, everyone.
Good night, guys.